Good morning, and welcome to everyone, both here in our sanctuary and those at home virtually. We're so very, very glad that you are joining us this morning. We welcome everyone to our spiritual home. We have open arms for all, gay, straight, whatever color your skin, whatever your beliefs may be. It's very, very good to see you here this morning. We do have several announcements to start our service. Please know that in May we are celebrating the lives of several beloved members of our community, Leah Bailey, Betty Maynard, and Bob French. Leah's service is next Saturday at 11 a.m. The dates and times for the others are in the Friday's e-newsletter. But please register in advance to help us finalize reception plans for after the memorial services. Plans for West Shore folks to travel to Transylvania and our partner church in Bagyon continue to move forward. The Bagyon church seeks to host refugee families from the Ukraine, and we have the opportunity to help them. Tomorrow is the launch of a Faithify campaign, which is kind of a UU version of GoFundMe. We want to raise $5,500, which will go directly to our partner church to enable them to do this, also helping the church, which we help to support. You can use the link given in our e-news, our monthly newsletter, or our Facebook page to take part in this worthy cause. If you have questions, any questions about Faithify, please check with Barbara Walker. We light the chalice today in honor of our Unitarian Universalist first principle, to affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person. We recognize that these are not just words to be spoken, but words that call us out. They call us out of our comfort zone into an ever-deepening commitment, a commitment we make to the rights of all whose inherent worth and dignity are denied, or diminished, or even destroyed by systems of oppression. These words call us into the practice of looking into our own hearts with courage and honesty.
Let us now witness to the unity of our spirit by saying together our unison affirmation words. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. El amor es el espíritu de esta iglesia, y el servicio su ley. Este es nuestro magnífico convenio, vivir juntos en paz, buscar la verdad en el amor, y ayudarnos los unos a los otros.
Come to this good morning, remembering the journey of freedom. The land we are on was another's. We mourn the legacies of oppression. Healing is our way forward. Joy
Let us now greet each other as feels mutually comfortable. If you like, you might include in your greeting a wave for the folks at home. They are waving back at you, I promise you. Let's greet each other now. So let's sing our opening hymn of the day. Let's sing our opening hymn of the day, What Wondrous Love, number 18 in your hymnal. Please rise in body or in spirit. Let's sing this together.
If most of us could name only one of the 7 UU principles, it would most likely be the one that says the inherent worth and dignity of all individuals, the very first principle. Actually, we wouldn't be sitting here this morning if we didn't believe in that one, really, would we? It seems pretty obvious to us that this principle is the very basic to our beliefs and to our own being. But have you ever thought back to the time, that point in time in your life when you really came to understand just what that meant? I mean, to you personally, not just a basic concept to everyone. I can. And if you will bear with me, I will reflect on how I came to understand it for myself. As I have shared in other reflections over the past 3 years, I had the extreme good fortune to grow up in Dick and Jane's America. Cleveland middle class, suburb, only child, 2 educated and ethical parents. But you know what? It was a bubble, although I certainly didn't realize that at the time. I went through school, including college, mostly interacting with other Dick and Jane offspring. They looked like me, they had the same desires as I, they acted like me. Oh, sure, a few of us went off in a couple kind of marginal directions, but life was actually very coherent and very similar. I really didn't think about it. If I had been asked, I would have confirmed that I was just fine, thank you very much. The week before I graduated from college, I got married to my college sweetheart, because that is what you did back in 1961. The next year, I had baby number 1. And the year after that, I had baby number 2. That wasn't just what you did back in 1961, that was actually poor planning. Perhaps I should say no planning, more accurately. But those were tough times financially. My husband was a teacher, and I had to keep my job as a high school teacher because we needed 2 teaching salaries in order to eat on a regular basis. In 1966, my husband took a job as a high school teacher and football coach in southern Ohio, in a small town just next to Portsmouth, Ohio, right on the Ohio River. I hadn't realized it at the time, but out of 88 counties in Ohio, Scioto County topped every one of the lists in terms of poverty, extreme poverty. The Brown Shoe Company had closed, leaving thousands of people unemployed. But even more importantly, Detroit, and notice I say Detroit, Steel, on the river, had laid off hundreds of workers and continued to downsize. Up the hills and above the river, they were called the hollers. The whole families lived. They lived together, they rarely came to town. The school buses didn't even go up in those hollers because they couldn't turn around. So the kids often just didn't ever bother going to school. Even the IRS did not go up into the hollers. I took a job teaching remedial reading at Portsmouth High School. Because Scioto County was so poor, it received more money in federal funding for remedial courses than it could possibly ever spend. I spent that first week of school unpacking boxes of reading machines that would provide the miracle cure for those students who couldn't read up to grade level. Then I met my students. They were mostly boys, grades 9 through 12. Average reading level was maybe 4th grade. Did the government really think that a reading machine that flipped words to them at an increasing pace was going to solve this problem? Really? So after a few weeks, I commandeered the assistant superintendent, and I insisted that he let me into the school storeroom where they kept the curriculum materials. I took elementary workbooks from grades 2 through 6, and I started all over again with these students who were considered, frankly, dumb. Guess what? Surprise, surprise. Of course they weren't dumb, nor were they ignorant. They were frustrated, and they were angry. I spent 2 years working with those kids. Did I produce a miracle? No. But they did improve their reading somewhat. But I was the one who got the most out of it. I managed to get to know these kids with whom students I'd never interacted with before. Their lives, so different from my own, made me, actually for the first time, rethink about how I viewed the world at large. While I was at Portsmouth High, I was also the advisor for the cheerleaders, a girls' cheering section that gave coordinated cheers and really waved some pretty cool pom-poms. I got to know several of the girls pretty well. I really enjoyed their spunkiness and their attitude. But one Friday afternoon, one of the girls, one of my favorites, came to tell me that she would not be able to attend that evening. I asked her why, and she seemed a little evasive, but I pressed, not being particularly subtle, and it turned out she couldn't find a babysitter for her baby. She was 15 years old. Now, where I grew up, a girl who got pregnant did one of 2 things. She either went to the home for unwed mothers in Akron, or she visited her aunt in Wyoming for a few months. Believe it or not, I had never met a young, unmarried mother who had kept her child. It was a whole new world for me. And with other students, I had the opportunity to grow up and appreciate them and their lives, so different from my own. I had a student assistant who liked to come into my classroom during her free time, and she would help organize things for me. One day she came in crying with a handful of anonymous letters accusing her of being a homosexual. She was devastated. I consoled her and vowed that I would help her find the letter writer. It took months, along with a very knowledgeable guidance counselor, for me to realize that she was writing the letters herself. It was her cry for attention, for help. Why was I so dense not to see that sooner? I guess Dick and Jane just really didn't worry about sexual insecurity. So why am I telling you all this? Because those 2 years in Southern Ohio really made me grow up. Yeah, I knew about worth and dignity in my own little world, but I had to move outside my bubble to really understand it. All the vacuous talking does nothing if you can't see it and make it work for you. I saw the worth of all of these students whose lives were so different from my own. It would be too easy to just discount, or maybe even worse, ignore those whose lives were so different from my own. Think back. Can you identify a time when you really became aware of what worth and dignity meant personally to you? I hope that your memory is as vivid as mine. If so, we are the fortunate ones.
Let us now enter into our meditation for all that is our lives. All are welcome to come forward, to share from the heart, to express a hope, a prayer, an intention by placing a stone or through writing on a card. Know that what you write on a card will be held in confidence, and if you request a follow-up, I or a member of our pastoral care team will reach out to you. Here are the joys and sorrows of our lives, which I will take into my meditations this week and pray for all that is our lives.
I just have to share that this morning I had an opportunity to practice my inherent worth and dignity when somebody flew by me 90 miles an hour on 71. I didn't have my normal response. So it's starting to work. It's taken a while. But I'm Karen Kircher, this is Carol Sweet, and Danny Dunchak and Judith Janes, the four of us are helping to organize the Jubilee Pledge Drive this year. So we've had such a great year celebrating the 75th anniversary of our church, especially all the generosity of people that came before us. And today we're going to start our next chapter by installing Reverend Makar as our new settled minister. He promised me he wouldn't get too settled, but he'd still be his spunky self. So today we will be celebrating that in Baker Hall and in the sanctuary. So just think of the stories that we'll have to tell to the next generation. The wells that we'll be able to dig from which they will drink. Carol Sweet's going to give you an update on the pledge.
Good morning. I wanted to share with you that as of today, there's been $355,000 pledged. It's just amazing. There have been 116 pledges, and overall, those pledges have increased by an average of 4%. So really just, and there's now 14 birds, if you want to take a look at the tree with the birds. And just thank you to everyone for your generosity.
We're a little bit over halfway there, and we're hoping that the pledges will come in very rapidly now. Please pledge generously to guarantee that we will be able to influence the generations to come. That's what we're here for. Contact Suhana Kiris if you need help with making the pledge, working around Realm, figuring all that out. She'd be glad to talk to you. And no matter what the amount, please make a pledge. In order for our board to decide the programming for this next year, they of course have to know what the resources they'll be working with are. So it's pretty important. And most importantly, keep June 17th open. We're going to have our Decades Dance Party in Baker Hall, celebrating the end of our Jubilee year. And from 6 to 9, we'll have pizza, and it's going to be a nice family event. So vintage clothes or T-shirts with your favorite rock band would be fun. And look for more about this in the June Shorelines. I only wish that when I went to my Beatles concert in 1964, they had sold T-shirts. And then I wish that I never would have washed it. And then I wish that I could give all that money to the church. So anyway, thank you very much.
Pledge Drive team, show some love to these guys. It's wonderful. And now today's offering will be given and gratefully received. Late last July and early August, I had the great honor of bringing greetings from West Shore to our partner church in the little village of Bagyon in the Transylvania region of Romania. The minister there, the Reverend Bela Fekete, invited me to lead a Sunday service, and since the Unitarianism there is Christian Unitarianism, my sermon would be based on a passage that I chose in the Christian scriptures. Today's sermon expands on that one. To get to the little village of Bagyon, it was a voyage of 6,000 miles. And as you can imagine, in any long voyage, I and my small group of travelers had long waits in one line after another line. This is the way of things with international travel. We were herded like sheep, and soon enough, I found myself lulled into the strange illusion that I was a sheep and nothing but a sheep. A traveling human sheep, obeying whatever the flight officials and attendants had to say. And it is a human thing to do, to play games of pretend. And there is a purpose behind it. International travel is a very complicated thing involving many parts and relying on cooperation. And if I, as the traveler, don't pretend to be a sheep and don't allow myself to be herded, well, I'm not going anywhere. But these games of pretend, I want to call them identity games, can go too far. After 16 hours of travel and playing the sheep, I could feel the sheep taking over. Tired and hungry as I was, when I saw something I wanted, I felt tempted to run right over others to get to it. I also found myself no longer thinking for myself. I just wanted the authorities to tell me what to do and where to go. I was tired. I was hungry. Bah! Thankfully, we made it to Bagyon, and my game of pretending to be a sheep was at an end. After all the months of planning and all the anticipation, finally, we met Reverend Bela and his wonderful wife, Polly, and the Bagyon community face to face. All the hospitality, all the kindness brought me back to my humanity. One highlight in that 2-week period of highlights was entering for the first time into the Unitarian church building there. Soon after arriving, Reverend Fekete invited us within those ancient walls for a tour. We climbed its tower. We saw the beautiful village of Bagyon surrounding us. We came back down, took a closer look at the outstanding renovation work that had recently been done to that church. I took special note of the ancient stones that had been found on the church grounds, remnants of the Roman garrison that had occupied that same exact place almost 1,000 years earlier. The stones had been set in the walls. They'd been set in the walls, precious nuggets of history. The largest, inscribed with a broken Latin phrase, stood right across from me as I was preaching in that pulpit. It was a mute witness to the passage of ages with all of its changes, as well as to something else that has never changed in human history, and that is oppression. In starkest contrast, the peace of that space felt so freeing and liberating. Closing my eyes, being still, I could feel a deeper peace within me, which would never allow itself to be pushed down indefinitely, never allow itself to be pressed down. In that moment, our first principle came to mind, that you and I and all people are beings of inherent worth and dignity. But it was the inherent part, in particular, that came alive for me in that moment, with a meaning that I realized I had not reflected on enough in my life, a meaning that I dare not forget if I am to have the life of fullness and aliveness that I so yearn for. Inherent means that there is nothing I can ever do to earn or deserve my worth and dignity. Inherent means that there is nothing I can ever do to lose that worth and dignity. The fundamental worth and dignity of all of us is a gift of grace. What came next for me in that moment of deeper peace and realization in the church in Bagyon was a recognition that here, in the very naming of grace, is a wholly other side to our Unitarian Universalist faith than what we normally hear about today. Normally, we are encouraged to be hard at work, busy at self-actualization and maxing out our potentials as people with certain collections of social identities. We are male or female or non-binary. We are cis or trans. We are gay or straight. We are black or white or brown. We are poor or middle class or wealthy, and we are so many other things. In the eyes of society, each and every one of these identities is something to understand, something to celebrate, perhaps, something to deal with. Each and every one is also burdened either by privilege or oppression, and our faith wants us to be free of all such burdens. It wants liberation and aliveness for us all. Yet that other side of our faith that we don't hear as much about today, the side of our faith that hangs on that one word, inherent, it is not so much about doing the work of fulfilling social identities as it is about being the peace that we fundamentally are. The difference here is a matter of two categorically different kinds of identities. Social identities are one level, and they require a lot of work. But then there is the deeper identity, what a Christian might call a child of God identity, which comes to each of us in unearned fashion as grace. And the task here is simply to allow that identity to happen, to be it. If we can allow it, be it, the fullness of the love that we always already are at the deepest level of our being, if we can operate from that spaciousness of compassion and peace, then the justice work that we do at the level of social identities will be more fulfilling and less likely to do damage to ourselves and to others. So often all our busy doing in the world smacks of desperation or unconscious agendas. So often in our work to become more personally healthy and socially responsible, it can feel like we are running to stand still. It can feel like we are trying to fill an inner emptiness by gorging ourselves on the latest wisdom or the latest silver bullet strategy. How is that even possible? To feel empty when at our core is a fullness of love and peace which comes to us as a gift of grace, which is our inherent worth and dignity. Ralph Waldo Emerson was one who was mightily puzzled by this irony. He once spoke of how people are like you and I, are like kings and queens, suffering from amnesia, wandering their kingdoms in tattered clothing, frantically busy, trying to work their way up the social ladder from the bottom, working their way up to the top. If they could only realize something, though, if they could only realize who they truly were, if they could do that, then they could, said Emerson, vault at once to their thrones and just be who they already are. Where does this amnesia that separates us from our deepest identity, our child of God identity, where does this amnesia come from? 1,000 years before Emerson was born, an answer came from Rumi, the mystic poet of Sufism, who said, "Our task is not to seek for love, but merely to seek and find all of the barriers within yourself that you have built against it." We have built barriers within. Barriers have been built. But how is it that these barriers could have been built within, barriers to the compassion and peace that is already fully ours? It is so because we have been taught that. We have been taught to do so in a world that grants worth and dignity only conditionally. The world teaches us how. To sum up so far, what I am saying is that there is a largely, at least today, largely unknown side to our Unitarian Universalist faith that is a light that shines in the darkness of a world which tempts us constantly to forget who we fundamentally are. And there has always been this darkness. It was this way thousands of years ago in the time of Rome. And it is this way now. Society has always divided up people based on arbitrary things like which family you were born into or which country you were born into or your physical characteristics. Society exerts power to judge some identities better and others worse. Society does not care that you personally had nothing to do with it based on these arbitrary things. We are given social roles to play, and we better get busy, and we better play them to the hilt, or else. This is play acting at a much different level than that of the traveling sheep role that I spoke of earlier. I chose that traveling sheep role so that I might cooperate with the authorities to get to Bagyon. But the sorts of roles I am talking about now, others choose them for us. Their eyes are constantly upon us, looking to see how well we play along. If we don't start taking those identities we have been given seriously, if we don't start taking them personally, the feedback can be brutal. If you're born in a male body, for example, you better get with the cisgender, heterosexual, patriarchal picture, or you will get punished. And on and on. To stay within the social roles chosen for us can simply be a matter of survival. To be human, in part, is to be a hodgepodge of all sorts of survival strategies, learned amidst the stresses of growing up in family life as well as life in the larger world. A larger world that likes to differentiate and categorize and make sure that everyone is in the right box and stays in that right box. But did you know that survival strategies are like scars that form over our souls? Every time we live from a survival strategy place, that running to stand still place, well, the scar only thickens. Eventually it gets to the point that God's peace deep within is covered up. The amnesia Emerson spoke of, it takes hold. It becomes a habit. This forgetfulness can become so complete that the amazing good news that it is possible to live from a place of sheer being as opposed to doing can meet up with apathy. Just to raise the issue that our social identities are only one dimension of our living, and that deep within all of us is God's peace within. Just to raise this possibility may inspire intense skepticism, even ridicule. God's peace? God's peace within me? What are you talking about? And yet, in the space of the church in Bagyon, and I would say this space also, one can almost believe again. One can almost feel like the child of God one really is and touch one's inherent worth and dignity, which is an identity categorically different from any of the others that are forced upon us. This is what came to me all those months ago while I was in the Bagyon church. I felt re-inspired by our Unitarian Universalist heritage and faith, and this morning with my installation service just a couple hours away, I am coming to you in the same way. That we do not have to live from a survival strategy place, that we do not have to continually salvage our sense of fundamental self-worth and dignity in the face of omnipresent shame. This is the message of possibility that the ancient founder of our faith, the Rabbi Jesus, preached. It is why he was crucified. The Roman leaders in Palestine where Jesus lived, Pontius Pilate thought to crucify Jesus would have been enough to crush his teachings, but it was not enough. The love of our teacher Jesus was too compelling to die. Jesus died, but his compassionate spirit was resurrected in the lives of his followers, for them as for us today. True religion was about seeing through all the survival strategy roles people play to get to the heart of the matter, that all people are children of God, including oneself. True religion, then, operates at two different levels. One level addresses human life as it is lived within the context of society's judgmentalism, together with all of the social identities that context creates. Here, we seek to heal from judgmentalism, which becomes a severe voice of judgmentalism in our own heads. And we want to do this with compassion. At this level of true religion, we also acknowledge that the hearts of the socially privileged are harmed by that very privilege that the world prizes. And to heal that harm, and we also invite in from the margins, the poor, the sick, the despised. We hear their voices. We respect their agency. We work together to dismantle oppressive systems. But that is only one level of true religion. The other level is to do as Rumi says, to seek and find all the barriers within ourselves that have been built against the love that we fundamentally are. It's about learning to live more frequently from a place of grace, from the knowledge of what one fundamentally is as a child of God, to live from the fullness of our being. All of this is implicit in the passage from the Christian scriptures I chose for that Sunday service in Bagyon all those months ago. Galatians chapter 3, verse 28, where the writer Paul says, There is neither Jew nor Greek. There is neither slave nor free. There is neither male nor female, for you are all one in Christ Jesus. 2,000 years have passed since Paul wrote those words, and so today we could cite any other examples of national, class, and gender identities together with altogether different identity categories. But from a God's eye point of view, an infinite point of view, they are all games of pretend in the face of all the ways a tiny baby is processed and categorized and put into some kind of caste by society. In the face of that, Paul insists, you are all one in Christ Jesus. Now, to the ears of this Unitarian Universalist, what Paul is saying here isn't so much about Christianity versus other world religions as it is a reminder to people of all faiths that there is in each of us an identity which is deeper and truer than any of the ones that society imposes upon us. An identity with love and peace at the core. Buddhists call it Buddha mind, or one's original face. Mystics call it cosmic consciousness. Stoics call it cosmopolitanism. Jungians speak of the self within, capital S, self within. Paul is just using words he is culturally and intellectually comfortable with, but the bare concept itself appears worldwide in religions and spiritual traditions everywhere and all times. Paul is also implying, I believe, that there can get to be a point in anyone's life where it feels like you are nothing but a continuously busy sheep, running to stand still. And there is something mysterious inside that resists capitulating to this, that insists that you are suffering from amnesia and forgetting something of momentous importance. This resistance and insistence, it is a restlessness that grows and grows until it can no longer be ignored. And at this point, some folks might go to the therapist. Still others might take a deep dive into science or philosophy. They might even start going to church. And these are all good and needed things. But I believe that the complete medicine that can heal the mysterious restlessness we can feel inside is the medicine of a complete Unitarian Universalism, which wants to help us remember and to never forget that below and beneath all of the identities society has forced upon us is the identity that is a gracious gift of the Spirit of life. And this is a dangerous teaching, because judgmentalism makes the world go round. This teaching, it upends all of the things people take for granted about what is valuable and valueless. It is certainly what outraged the rulers of Rome. This is why the Christians suffered so in the early days. Of course, over time, we know Christianity was established as the official religion of Rome. It became as bad as Rome in dividing up people into the powerful and the powerless, the rich and the poor, the ugly and the beautiful. It began to play the same game that society always plays in judging people as worthless or worthy on the basis of identities that are in themselves arbitrary. Christianity strayed from Jesus. It required reform, and both Unitarianism and Universalism, they were both born with a passion for reform. One of the greatest gifts that our Transylvanian Unitarian churches gave to the world was Francis David. Back in 1568, he was warned by a debater of the Calvinist persuasion who said, if I win this debate, you will be executed. That's what happened back then. If I win this debate, he said, you will be executed. Francis David replied calmly, if I win this debate, you will be given the freedom due to every child of God. Because Francis David knew to get to the root of who we truly are, children of the Spirit of life, of the divine. It's to realize what it means to be free. Faith is a relationship with the divine that frees us from the tyranny of having to deserve one's dignity through believing orthodox things or practicing orthodox rituals or any of the like. Faith is knowing unshakably that worth and dignity is unconditional, and so there is no more need to waste energy keeping ourselves small so that we can live down to, not up to, so we can live down to other people's prejudices and to society's superego voice within our heads. This has been our Unitarian Universalist tradition for a little more than 500 years now, proclaiming the freedom that comes from dwelling in the grace of the love at the core of one's being. When you live from that, the voice of judgmentalism towards yourself and towards others, it softens and then maybe even goes quiet. Compassion, on the other hand, grows, and your heart becomes big enough for this world, which is full of so much sorrow and so much beauty and joy. This is the freedom in feeling connected to your core self. This is loving others in the spirit of that freedom. Society, in all its judgmentalism, hates that. It hates that. And we Unitarians, we have suffered for it. Suffering is no stranger to us. We may know how the story ended for Francis David. Tolerance was met with intolerance. The oppressive power of Rome reared its ugly head yet again, reincarnated into a newer version, the opponents of David. The last book Francis David ever wrote was one line scratched upon the wall of a prison cell, high upon a mountaintop called Deva. He was sick. He was pitifully weak. He scratched upon that wall, Egy Az Isten. He died of neglect on November 15th, 1579. His body was thrown into an unmarked grave. No one person, no one that to this day knows where his body lies. But I want you to listen to something else about our faith tradition. It does not quit. It does not quit. It does not matter that the grave of the great Francis David is unknown. It does not matter how he died. The last book he ever wrote, that inscription that he had scratched into the wall in his prison cell high atop the mountain in Deva, precious 3 words, they are at the heart of every Unitarian church in Transylvania and in this country as well. Egy Az Isten, God is one. The spirit of Francis David, just like his master Jesus, can never die. And that was my sermon. That was my sermon to the church in Bagyon. They are 6,000 miles away. And they're right here, right now. They're right here and they're right now with us. Our partnership has lasted for decades. Let it last for untold decades more. We in America, they in Romania, are both religious minorities, surrounded by majority upon majority. We can feel so small at times, but we must know our shared faith tradition of Unitarian Universalism transcends geography. It transcends time. It is medicine to the hearts and souls of people whom life has made weary, if people make room for it in their hearts and make time in their schedules to receive it. It is a sign to all the world that while society impresses role upon people, there is yet a deeper identity to everyone, and it is a source of peace. It is a source of blessing. It is a source of such tremendous joy that people in all ages and in all countries have given it the most sacred names they can muster. Great Spirit, Atman, Goddess, God, on and on. And above all, we can draw on it as often as we like, because it is within us. It is within us. As a popular Transylvanian house blessing goes, where there is faith, there is love. Where there is love, there is peace. Where there is peace, there is a blessing. Where there is a blessing, there is God. And where there is God, there is no need. No need. In most Unitarian houses in Transylvania, you will find this blessing on the wall. And may it be a blessing that consecrates this space as well. Amen. Let's sing our closing hymn for the day, Be Thou My Vision. Please rise in body or in spirit.
Please join me in saying our chalice extinguishing words. We extinguish this flame, but at the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry with us until we meet again.
So my daughter and I have for a long time had a deal. Anytime I mention her in a sermon, I got to pay her money. Well, I don't have to mention her because she is actually literally here. I'm going to owe lots of big money after I ask her to do this. Would you please stand? I don't think I have enough money in the savings account to pay for that. I love you, and I'm so glad you're here today. And all my friends, all my colleagues. Thank you. Here is the benediction for today. Please take these words with you. May you know the wondrous love at your core. May you know the power of your power at the center of your being. Writer Aeneas Nin once said, "And the day came when the risk to remain tight in a bud was more painful than the risk it took to blossom." May this be the day. May this be the day. So may it be. Go in peace.